Are you ready for the truth? Bring it on.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Do you want the whole truth?
I don't think you're ready.
Governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people.
It's Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth.
Welcome back. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. I'm not going to change the Reagan. It continues to be appropriate. And the band's doing fine when they bring us in and out of breaks. They do a great job. Speaking of bringing us in and out of breaks, well, at the break at the top of the hour, you get the news delivered to you by American Family News. And those folks knock it out of the park. Chris Woodward, anchoring tonight. He's the anchor man, and he will be with us. He's the anchor man tonight. Yeah. He'll be with us Friday for Woodward and Crane Beat the Press. Yeah. Check that out. And have you seen any of the promos for that? Woodward and Crane Beat the Press? No, the anchor. I mean, you see Burgundy. He's everywhere. He's staying classy. Not really, but we'll see. So, where do you go from Ron Burgundy to tax discussion? Well, you go to Pete Sepp. He's executive vice president of the National Taxpayers Union. He'll be with us in just a moment. What I want to do right now is play for you a clip on inequality and income inequality. This is the focus today. Think about this. Website tanking. Now it has 29,000, but they're not actually, the interview earlier we did, you never really can count on a number. Is it really? Yeah, you got to ask again and again. You ever watch the movie Meet the Parents? I'm not advocating. I'm just saying, have you watched it? Okay. Where the father-in-law keeps asking the same question, to Nurse Fokker. You know movie? No? Okay. Well, you got to ask the question, really? It's almost like you got to go, really? 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 And then you'll get part of the answer, part of the truth, and then you'll find out, well, the number's smaller than that, and they haven't confirmed. Maybe it's in the shopping cart, but it actually hasn't been purchased. So the goal now is to focus in on income inequality, and I don't think it's a winner for them, by the way. Margaret Thatcher spoke to this. You can check out the Facebook page for all that, as well as a picture of Crane, Morning Crane, and some wonderful comments, by the way. Thank you so much. They're just, you all rock. High five. High five. Now I go to President Obama speaking to the idea of making sure that government is not only watching this, but putting in programs that help us all so we can not have this dramatic gap between the rich and the poor. Roll it.
It's the measurable outcomes and reduced bankruptcies and reduced hours that have been lost because somebody couldn't make it to work, and healthier kids with better performance in schools, and young entrepreneurs who have the freedom to go out there and try a new idea. Those are the things that will ultimately reduce a major source of inequality and help ensure more Americans get the start that they need to succeed in the future.
Well, that sounds pretty good. Executive Vice President Pete Sepp joins us now. Hey, Pete. How are you? Good. Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
Oh, very well, thank you. And glad, I hope you did as well.
I did. I got to see my in-laws. I got to see Pastor Aaron Free, who is a good friend of the family, and I learned so much. It's amazing when you reflect of what you're thankful for, and one of the things I'm very thankful for is our God-given freedoms, and I get the idea that even when the government says they want to try to help me, that oftentimes if they're going to help me, it means I'm going to lose more of the freedom, more of my liberties, and so I'm not a fan of that. President Obama just makes the statement, hey, we can see the measurable results when cutting down on bankruptcies, and we can pretty much advance an agenda where government can fix income inequality. That's pretty much what he said. I'm going to play this clip for you, and then what I'd like you to be, Pete, is the man in the crowd that wasn't invited by President Obama, planted there to ask a question or to heckle. But actually, President Obama turns to you and says, "So, what'd you think of that?" I'll play the clip for you now, and if you wouldn't mind bringing that one home. Is that all right?
You bet.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. Roll it!
Third, we need to set aside the belief that government cannot do anything about reducing inequality. It's true that government cannot prevent all the downsides of the technological change and global competition that are out there right now. And some of those forces are also some of the things that are helping us grow. And it's also true that some programs in the past, like welfare before it was reformed, were sometimes poorly designed, created disincentives to work. But we've also seen how government action time and again can make an enormous difference in increasing opportunity and bolstering ladders into the middle class. Investments in education, laws establishing collective bargaining and a minimum wage. These all contributed to rising standards of living for massive numbers of Americans.
All right, first question, comment. Executive Vice President, National Taxpayers Union, Pete Sepp. You, sir.
Well, first question would be the quote you played previously. It's kind of funny that the President of the United States is talking about reducing bankruptcies of individuals when the United States government itself is now in debt more than its annual economic output, which is pretty financially suicidal for any normal household in America. So lecturing about reducing bankruptcy is a pretty hypocritical thing coming from any president of the United States. But I digress a little bit. Maybe we should talk here more about taking President Obama at his word. There are lots of things governments can do to help reduce inequality, and that's to deliver more opportunity by simplifying the tax system, by getting out of the way of small businesses, especially micro businesses that are being strangled by regulations from the EPA and the IRS and the HHS, the whole government soup of the alphabet soup of government agencies. Lots of things that governments can do to help boost better incomes and reduce inequality. Unfortunately, the president didn't really mention any of those. He mentioned a lot of the social programs that, even though he's giving a nod to welfare reform, would really turn back the clock to the bad old days of welfare that he was decrying. I mean, this is the administration that was trying to take the initiative to allow states to roll back work requirements for welfare benefits and relax the standards so that things like volunteering for various organizations that employ others somehow counts as looking for work. Those kinds of things are not the kind of good, tough work requirements that we need that have been a success of welfare reform. So you can't say on the one hand that, welfare was a flawed program before it was reformed and now it's working, and then say, but we want to turn back the clock anyway and go back to the way it was when it didn't work that I was just complaining about. It's a circular argument.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
It's amazing that, and again, this is from, I get the idea that if nobody questions you and you're told, hey, how great you are and what an eloquent speaker you are, you'll develop a pride, a certain hubris, and you've never been held to account. So you're pretty much, hey, I walk on water, I can do it all. Because what you just said, I was listening to the speech and I thought to myself, there's multiple areas where you're speaking to, and I'm thinking, heavens, Pete, he's making a statement of support of something that he's undermined. And
yes.
and so when he's, people would argue all president's speech is no. He directly addresses some things. But one thing that really got me, Pete, was the fact that he says the economy, and I'm paraphrasing, grows from the middle out. And that concerns me because that tells me either government's pushing people down to the middle, and then the idea would be, no, they're also allowing people to come up to the middle. But if you're focused on getting people to the middle, you're going to bring down everybody. So my question is, tell me if it's true. Does the economy grow from the middle out?
No, it comes from people who are in the middle aspiring to get up that ladder and have government get out of their way while they're doing it. That's one way that you grow an economy. Another way is when you allow successful folks to put their investments in things like job creation, expanding their own firms, rather than having to engage in creative tax accounting just to hold on to, say, half of what they make every year. And in California, a place like that, with the federal and state tax burden the way it is, you really are in a situation where you're fighting to keep half of what you earned if you're at a certain income level. This is the other thing. We were talking about welfare reform. One of the things that was almost the same period of time that was enacted and has done great things in helping the middle class was a capital gains tax reduction. That was passed in 1997 in legislation within a few months of some of the welfare reform legislation that was passed. And that allowed a huge boom in the stock market that made investors out of more than 10 million American households. And those were not all rich people. Those were folks investing in 401ks, dividend reinvestment plans, all kinds of vehicles that built wealth for retirement and education, the very thing that the president says government has invested in. Well, people can invest in education if they are allowed to grow their own money. And tax rates that were reduced in 1997 were a key to that kind of wealth accumulation.
Wait a second. Hold on here. Now you're really throwing me, because the tax increase is what caused the economic growth in the 1990s. So says every Democrat that I've heard attribute the gain to. And what you're telling me is it wasn't that. It was actually allowing people to keep their own money so they would have that money. Let's take away the names of Wall Street, Main Street, whatever it may be. Individuals having money and being able to plug that in, looking at investments or companies and saying, you know what, I'm going to plug it in there. I'm going to invest in that, and then I'm going to get a return on that, and government's not going to penalize that return. I'm going to have, in essence, more money. It's going to incentivize me to invest, and we'll see innovation and a whole host of things. So you're telling me it wasn't the tax increase?
That's right. The Taxpayer Relief Act of 1997 came along at just the right time. We were experiencing major economic growth problems owing to the tax increase package of 1993, passed 4 years earlier. That had income tax increases, gas tax increases, lots of things that were preventing Americans of many economic categories from being able to advance. The 97 Relief Act didn't reverse all of those tax increases, but it did pull back on some of them in key areas. One of them was a higher family tax credit. Another was a set of better incentives tax-wise for higher education, but it was that capital gains tax reduction that really allowed the economy to catch fire and, ironically, produce some of the higher revenues to the federal government due to economic growth that erased budget deficits. When you combined the higher revenues from a more robust economy and stock market, and you combine that with the spending reductions that we experienced through the Balanced Budget Act of 1997, you combine that with welfare reform, you had a package for success that led to a very brief shining period of budget surpluses in the late 90s and in the year 2000. That was a formula for success that had bipartisan support.
I get the feeling, and I know you're not personally endorsing any particular group or candidate or whatever it may be, but I get the feeling when I learned the truth about the 1990s and the boom and what we experienced, if people heard that, we may have President Gingrich. But I digress. Now, here's another question for you. The way things are shaped in the cartoonish world of politics, and Pete, we may go over time. I know I asked you to 7:20. Can we go a little longer with you?
Absolutely.
Thank you, my friend. Now, the way things are shaped, they look at Gordon Gekko, and Oliver Stone. I mean, think about it. You're going to take what Wall Street is from Oliver Stone, a man who praises the Cuban healthcare system, among other things. And they go, greed is good. And we all know, we've all seen people on Wall Street, especially if you ever watch Law and Order, which I don't think you should because it'll just bring you down. It's a bummer. And plus, there's a narrative there that's really attacking freedom in essence. But I digress. The point is, you always see Wall Street being the bad guys, the evil guys. And you're telling me Wall Street's not Wall Street. Wall Street is us. And Wall Street are people willing to do that. And that's part of the engine of growth. So the engine of growth doesn't start with government plugging in investments. No, the engine of growth is actually individuals making decisions and producing more and being able to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Okay. Yes. I mean, and it's a curious phenomenon you see among some of the older Gordon Geckos of the world who want to say, well, I've got my pile. Now, I believe that the government should raise tax rates so you never get yours. That's why we get folks like Warren Buffett who advocate for higher death taxes and higher income tax rates. Sometimes I wonder if these are just folks who don't want to have to wait in line at their country club. It kind of keeps down the population of folks who are able to afford that kind of thing. That's a real problem, especially for the United States, because we are one of the last countries on earth where there's upward mobility. And sometimes we forget that if you try to level the population, provide middle-class entitlements, well, that means higher tax rates on the middle class because there are not enough rich people to finance that vast of a government system. That's why in places where you have government-run health care, government-run educational benefits, where there are virtually no private institutions of education, you have things like value-added taxes and 30 or 40% tax rates that fall on the middle class rather than just the rich.
And we've certainly seen that. I love the fact that when we talk about rich, people immediately get a vision, and oftentimes it's a Gordon Gekko or it's some snob who, the epitome of a person who is born on third base and thinks they hit a triple. And we all know somebody like that or seen somebody like that, even in a character or whatever it may be. And my question is, I get the idea that we don't live in a caste society, economic caste society, in the sense of the idea of wealth and people accumulating wealth, and it just stays in generations. And by the way, I think when people plan for their families to have a leg up, so to speak, or some kind of economic resource when they pass on, or when they want to support the church, for example, or a whole host of things, organizations, that's a beautiful thing. I don't have a problem with that. But tell me, you're the expert. How much percentage-wise is the wealth earned, and how much of it is inherited in the general sense, Pete?
Among the super wealthy, we can see a higher percentage of inherited wealth, but there's a fascinating study by Tax Foundation, our colleagues at a nonpartisan think tank here in Washington, D.C. They studied 9 years' worth of tax data looking only at people who reported $1 million or more in income on their federal tax returns. And it was determined that less than 50% of all of the people that they studied could claim to have millionaire status 3 times or more out of those 9 years. In other words, your chances of moving out of millionaire status were very, very high, and being able to hit all 9 years as a millionaire in that tax data was almost impossible. It was a single-digit percentage of people who were millionaires each of the 9 years studied. That means that, you might be a small business owner who happened to have a great year or 2 out of those 9, but many times you had bad years. You had to make high investments, or you got hit with big tax bills, or you suffered economic downturns, and you had to climb your way back up the ladder. That's the kind of struggle we see in America. It's a very noble struggle, and it's something we need to be aware of, that, as I'm fond of saying, the tax code is not riddled with madcap heiresses or monopoly guys in pinstripe suits. It just doesn't exist. There's a lot of mobility.
And when we talk about economic quintiles, we're talking about individuals within those quintiles, as you just said, moving in and out. It's not static.
That's right.
So,
that's right. And,
yeah,
and the tax rates have a lot to do with that.
Explain this in the moments we've got. We got about 90 seconds left, and I want to know why a fair tax or national sales tax or a flat tax would actually be enough to fund our government, but also encourage and incentivize economic growth and prosperity.
Because when you have a predictable tax system with a stable rate that doesn't punish hard work and investment, you incentivize people to perform work, to start businesses, to hire others, to invest for their future without regard of tax consequences, without having to figure out a loophole or worm your way through 1,000 pages worth of tax law just to hold on to a little bit more of your money. You are freed to engage in pursuits that mean the most to you and your family and others without having to worry first about how it will look on your tax return.
And it takes the power away from government and restores it to the individual, yes?
Absolutely, because a single-rate, transparent system shows people how much their government is costing them in much more understandable terms. And when those terms are brought home to the American people, I'm betting most of them will say, wait a minute, we're paying way too much for the government we're getting, and we're going to demand more value.
Executive Vice President, National Taxpayers Union, Pete Sepp. Love you, brother. Thank you. Take care. And
take care.
We will be back tomorrow night. Go to the Facebook page. The show continues in a way. And thank you all for your comments. Know that God knows you. He created you. You're worth it. He loves you right where you're at. Live with honor in your life, compassion in your heart, and always keep the faith in Jesus Christ. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. AFR Talk.